We've got some really interesting news for you here on the union busting front. A couple of stories to bring to you. Let's start with Starbucks. Let's throw this tear sheet up on the screen. So a number of stores, Starbucks stores in Buffalo, have been working to unionize, news that we brought you before. And these would be the first Starbucks stores to be unionized in the entire country. So this is a really big deal. And Starbucks appears to be totally freaking out and taking radical approaches to making sure that these workers do not ultimately unionize. New York Times with a good story here about some of the tactics that have been employed. The lead is during her decade plus at Starbucks, Michelle Eisen says she's endured her share of workplace stress. She points to increased productivity goals, high turnover, etc. But she had never encountered a change that the company made after workers at her store and 2 other Buffalo area locations filed for a union election. 2 additional support managers, quote unquote, from out of state who often work on the floor with the baristas and who, according to Ms. Eisen, have created unease. Now, Starbucks says those additional managers, they've also flooded these stores with new workers who weren't initially involved in the union effort. So now you got a new whole group of people that you've got to educate and you got to persuade. And by the way, you've got to do this under the watchful eye of these corporate level managers who have come in to effectively spy on these workers. It's very clear what's going on here. Another tactic that they use, so early on, they have pushed to expand the bargaining unit so that it's not just these couple of stores that said, hey, we want to unionize. They're saying, oh, we want it to be all of the stores in Buffalo, which of course makes it harder because again, you've got to go now, you've got to organize all of those stores in Buffalo. So they did that. Then they had these quote unquote listening sessions, which of course were, anti-union propaganda, one-on-one in a very intimidating setting. They had corporate executives all the way up to the level of Howard Schultz come in and, be in these stores and sit for some of these listening sessions with workers. And now what they're partly doing is flooding the stores with new workers, sending in these spies, these assistant managers to make sure there's no, funny business about talking about worker solidarity or unions. They're going above and beyond to make sure that this union drive is ultimately not successful. And we got to be honest with you. It'll probably work.
Oh, I'm almost certain it will.
Yeah,
work.
because we've seen when companies decide there's not going to be a union there, whether it's Starbucks, whether it's Amazon, whether it's Walmart, they will do whatever's necessary. Now, I will tell you that some of these, according to the New York Times and according to my own knowledge of labor law, some of these tactics probably fall into the category of illegal intimidation.
But you have to investigate it.
Union elections are supposed to take place in a laboratory-like condition. It is not supposed to be subject to all this kind of pressure and manipulation and changing the game and bringing people in and these assistant managers serving spies. None of that is supposed to be happening. So it's very possible that, like what happened in Bessemer, Alabama, if the union election does happen and the workers who want a union do not prevail, it is likely this will be contested and they may have to run a new election, et cetera, et cetera. But especially in a service industry where turnover is already very quick, the more you push these things off into the future, the greater your chance of ultimate success is. So Starbucks likely breaking the law here, and also it likely won't matter.
Well, what's stunning is that they even have a transcript of a video in which a district manager, this was just in September, was in Arizona, and she tells coworkers the company asked her to spend time in Buffalo over the next 90 days because, quote, there's a huge task force out there that's trying to fix the problem because if Buffalo, New York gets unionized, it will be the first market in Starbucks history.
Yeah.
And she also says that when someone asks if the task force is a, quote, last-ditch effort to try and stop it, she says, yeah, we're going to save it. I mean, it's on video.
Pretty blatant.
It's literally out in the open. It's pretty stunning. I love how they're just packing these stores full of employees, even though they don't need to be there.
Right.
All in order to try and screw with it. I mean, look, it doesn't take a genius to say that this seems pretty illegal, allegedly, for the Starbucks lawyers and, for whatever their official explanation for all of this. They say it's official company policy, just for the record. But put that in the context of where we are right now, and this is what we've been trying to keep our eye on. The biggest story in the country is millions of people quitting their jobs, getting higher wages, other, many tens of thousands at John Deere and many Kellogg, other places coming together and demanding better working conditions after a huge moment of sacrifice in the economy. And you put all of that together and you really do see a stunning disconnect in terms of where national attention and focus is and where it should be. And it's because of the class bias that we see in so much of our media. Like I said, I mean, I jokingly was telling you all this, but the Sunday New York Times was literally about January 6th, was about recreating January 6th and pointing to the 7 people who were most, responsible. And I'm like, do you people truly have nothing better to do to elevate to the highest consciousness? Well, look, to be fair, this is a New York Times story. I'm not saying that it isn't covered in any way, but ask yourself what's on cable news. Ask yourself what is really having momentous attention. And it's because there's no Trump angle here. There's no Republicans bad, Democrats good, or Joe Manchin, Bernie Sanders, or whatever. It's just people who are trying to get a better wage and the absolute lengths, apolitical lengths, right? I mean, remember, this is Howard Schultz. He's, big time Democrat and all of that, big founder, and that Black Lives Matter all over the stores, all that stuff. I'd love to know, by the way, how many of these workers are actually black, given what we know about Buffalo, New York. And of course, they're willing to, take out all the stops there. So it stops right there whenever it comes to the wages end. But I think it's amazing when you see that class bias really penetrate, and we just see each one of these data points bubble up all across the country. And it really does take almost a John Deere level one to even get the media to pay the tiniest little bit of attention. Like, it takes 10,000 workers at John Deere. But this is happening everywhere. I mean, and Starbucks throwing everything at it. We saw the roots of that in Amazon. And I think this is going to be a continuing through line for the next couple of months. More and more people are going to think about trying to unionize, and the companies themselves, they're richer than ever, Krystal. They made more money than ever in 2020 because of the pandemic, which the unions tell us all the time, and they're going to use that money in order to try and crack down on what's happening.
Yes, and I mean, on the other hand, you can tell that Starbucks sees this as a real threat. And that in and of itself is encouraging,
That's
just
true.
as Amazon saw the Bessemer effort as a real threat. And so they do fear that if one of these shops were to sneak through, it could start a domino effect. And I don't think they're wrong to fear that. On the media point, it's not just that there isn't a Trump versus Biden angle here to be had. It's also that the whole idea of a cross-partisan, multiracial working class working together in solidarity goes against the entire narrative that they've been selling the country for years now.
True, yeah.
It's very inconvenient. We're supposed to hate each other, right? We're supposed to be inches away from a civil war. We're supposed to believe that our greatest enemy is, the person who thinks differently about politics or comes from a different cultural background or whatever it is. That's who's supposed to be the real enemy. So when you see these workers, and as I mentioned before, we're going to talk to a local president with John Deere about what's going on there. But, you see these workers not just fighting for themselves, but a lot of the core of the strikes right now are about a 2-tier wage system. So you've got older workers who are good. They're doing pretty well. They've got a pretty good contract.
Right.
And they're fighting for their brother and sister coming down the line who's coming up with a much worse deal. And they're saying, this is about me fighting for our future. It's not even about myself. That sort of solidarity and collective action is not supposed to be a thing in America today if you believe the lens and the prism through which the media presents everything, where it's all about, outrage over masks or not masks or vaccine or not vaccine. Those, or Trump or not Trump, I mean, that's the ultimate fault line in all of this. So to see this type of action, well, it just doesn't fit with their narrative. Starbucks is not the only big corporation who's out there union busting. We can bring you another update on Dollar General. This one's pretty interesting too. Let's throw this, More Perfect Union had this scoop. Guys, they're doing such good work over there. Make sure you follow them if you can support the work that they're doing, because they've really been highlighting these union struggles in an effective way. They say, scoop, Dollar General was caught illegally intimidating workers just days before a store in Connecticut is set to vote on whether to form the company's first ever U.S. union. District managers visited the store on Saturday and threatened to close it if workers voted yes. I mean, that is blatantly textbook illegal worker intimidation tactics. It happens all the time, mind you. It happens all the time. Whether it's as explicit as this reportedly is, that they just came in and were like, you vote for a union, this store's getting shut down and you're not going to have a job anymore, or whether it's more subtle. I remember during the VW organizing in Tennessee, there were politicians who were suggesting, hey, you know, they may just not have the jobs here for you going forward if you vote to unionize, even though Volkswagen themselves were actually in favor of the union. So you see this happen all the time. It's also worth noting, More Perfect Union says that the union involved here, UFCW, they'll file charges with the NLRB against Dollar General for those union busting activities. The vote is scheduled for this Friday. And part of the context here is Dollar General actually pays the lowest wages of any retailer. And workers who've been talking to More Perfect Union and other outlets say that they have also been dramatically understaffed, especially during the pandemic. And, you know, we've been covering like customers coming in very upset and ornery and stressed out, and workers have felt their lives to be at risk. Police have had to be called in for all kinds of incidents. So it's about low wages, long hours, no leave, and people feeling like their physical safety is at risk because it's basically they're alone in the store having to handle whatever ultimately comes to them. So that's why they're trying to unionize, and Dollar General going above and beyond again with allegedly illegal tactics to try to intimidate these workers and make sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, it's like we said, it's going to continue happening. And you look at Dollar General, and even the impetus for the unionization, according to one of the employees who spoke with within these times, was that they were being treated terribly, and that the district manager allegedly ignored a complaint of sexual harassment and was heard making racist remarks. And then the district manager unfairly accused a manager of stealing. And they all got scared because they were like, if they can do this to us, they have this amount of control over our lives. And if you've been in a rural part of the country, sometimes Dollar General is the only game in town. And a lot of people have to drive like 20, 30 miles just to like go to a Walmart in order to try and buy general necessities, let alone groceries, which is a big problem for a lot of people. So Dollar General and the dollar store, these various types, they have a lot of power in these rural communities. And pricing power for wages. They can pay nothing. This is an Amazon story, which we're about to get to as well. So it's incredibly important that we track it.
Yeah, they have an incredibly predatory model. I mean, that's the bottom line. They thrive when economic times are difficult, when the working class is struggling. And I think the stat I saw is that 75% of the population lives within 5 miles of a Dollar General. They're everywhere. And, I live in a rural community. We've got one a few miles away from me. They're ubiquitous. And yet they're highly profitable. They did extremely well during the pandemic, record-breaking profits, and yet lowest wages of any large retailer in the entire country. So that's what those workers are fighting for.
That's right.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.